Okay, so as I've talked before, my dad is in prison. He's been in prison for a very long time. And the only way that we communicate is through letters. And at the end of each letter, he always writes how terrible prison is. The food is terrible, the people are terrible, everything about prison is terrible. So I grew up with this mindset that like every prison in the whole entire world is like this terrible, terrible place. And that mindset was also like reinforced with shows like Orange is the New Black, Jail, Beyond Scared Street, stuff like that. And it wasn't until I was older and I started traveling that I realized that mindset was totally wrong. Like when I went to Europe for the Harry Potter premiere, I met this guy who said that he was currently serving 4 years in jail, but he had to be back in prison at 4. And I was like, what? What do you mean you have to like be back in prison? So we had this really long discussion about it. And so today I'm going to be telling you the main differences between the prison system in America and the prison system in Europe. And my 3 main points are going to be the overall structure of the prison, so the physical aspect of it, as well as what happens within the prison, the recidivism rates, which is the rate at which they go back to prison after being let out, and what life is like for the ex-offender once they leave prison. Okay, so in the top left corner is the cell structure. In Europe, they have a pod system where the central part is the security aspect, and then they branch off into sections with 6 to 8 cells per pod, and they don't segregate the prisoners by what they did or by race or by gang. They basically just put them in. Whereas in America, they are segregated by like race and by what they did and if they need to be protected and stuff like that. But the physical aspect of the cells in America, they have a metal bed, a metal toilet, a metal sink. They are lucky if they get a window which just overlooks the prison yard. And with overcrowding, there's now four 2 bunk beds per cell right now in America. Whereas in Europe, they have comfortable beds, they have chairs, they're able to use laptops, they have windows in every cell, they have the painting of the cells in general are like light, vibrant colors, like beige, like green, because in Europe they have more of a rehabilitative aspect, whereas in American cells it's very dull colors because they are more toward punishing the inmates rather than rehabilitating them. So in Europe they have this thing called restorative justice, which means they want to rehabilitate the prisoner before they let them go. Rather than in America, they were focused on punishing the inmate for what they did, rather than helping them become better people once they leave prison. In America, the average minimum sentence is 3 years, whereas in Europe it's less than 1 year. And that is because the minimum sentence per offense is usually 3 years, and most prisoners in Europe spend less than a year in prison. The longest sentence that you can get in America is life, whereas in Europe it's 21 years. There was an article by the Huffington Post talking about this man in France who killed 77 people, and he only got 21 years in prison. But the thing is, they focus solely on rehabilitation. So if he's not rehabilitated to be a part of society after those 21 years, they have the power to give him more time to mentor him and make him a better person. So what is it like in prison? So in America, they have a strict routine that takes away their independence. They are told what to wear, when to sleep, when to eat, when to do programs and stuff like that. The National Academy of Sciences says that this structure makes it hard for the ex-offenders to be themselves when they're out, because they have freedom when they're out, whereas during the whole time they're in prison, they're stuck on this schedule. Whereas in Australia, they don't really have a schedule. They can wear their own clothes, they make their own meals, they're required to work and take classes. And a main thing for prisons in Europe is that they really encourage privacy, so the guards aren't really intrusive. So like they knock on the doors before they go into their cells. They they talk to the prisoners in Europe like they're actual people, whereas in America, a study by the Federal Bureau of Justice said that they treat them like animals and that they don't really have a sense of independence. And if they want to do programs or stuff like that, that they would have to pay out of their own pocket because they don't feel like they need to like their school system in prison, the family has to pay for it or they have to come up with it on their own with work. So next is the recidivism rate. In America, the recidivism rate is 68%, which means they're way more likely to go to jail. And the Federal Bureau of Justice states that the 60% are back in prison within 3 years. And one study by them tracked 404,000 inmates in 2005, and within 3 years, 67.8% were back behind bars. And in Europe, the recidivism rate is 20%, and that is mostly due to the rehabilitative approach that they have. The cost per inmate per year in America is $31,286, whereas in Europe it's $93,000. And that's because everything is included within the European system. The programs, the schooling, everything. And honestly, the total cost the Europe spends less money because most of the people that leave prison don't come back. So it brings the amount of prisoners in the system way down and they don't have as much to spend. And lastly, it's what life is like outside of prison. And most ex-offenders rely on their family and they expect to be back in this family dynamic like nothing ever changed. But a study by the Urban Institute of Justice Policy Center stated that 82% of ex-offenders thought it would be easy to go back to their house and live life as it was before, but they had a really hard time, and 45% of the ex-offenders had to wait at least 8 months to even get a job. This is because only 12.5% of employers actually want to employ ex-offenders. Whereas in Europe, they get to maintain family relationships, and that's because most prisons let the prisoner go home on weekends. And in one study by the Federal Bureau of Justice, they stated that they had a group go to Europe in 2002, and they saw that during weekends and some afternoons, the prisoners are allowed to go home to spend time with their family, and that helps the family dynamic stay the way it is because they have contact with them a lot. And they also have transition programs in Europe to help them get jobs and such like that. The one thing that most prisoners have trouble with is finding a job in America. In every application that we get, there's always this question: have you ever been convicted of a crime? Yes or no. And you know that if like you check yes, you're most likely not going to get the job. Whereas in Europe, they don't even ask if you've like committed a crime. They trust the prison system to rehabilitate that person like completely, so they can be a member of society. So, and so in conclusion, I think that America has a lot to reform, and they can look to Europe for examples on what they should do within our prison system, because it seems like what Europe is doing right now is working, whereas our prison system is just getting worse.
Bless you. Bless you.
Excuse me.
So shitty.
Pardon me. Matt, you were going to do a
Yeah.
evaluation.
I think she did a good job. I did feel like at the end of the speech, I really got an understanding of how the prison system differs. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know, and that was probably the point of the speech. So I think she accomplished her goal. Her delivery was a little weak. She kept using note cards to refer to, but it was helping her content a lot. Her visual aids were helpful at times because she elaborated on them. There was one image that was a little busy. I got a little preoccupied trying to figure it out. Maybe cut that one out. Her sources, she had a lot of them, but I don't think she properly orally cited them all equally. Like just a couple were say, oh, this was a report, or this was a report, but she didn't really say who they were by. But I think her content was organized very well. She clearly previewed it all and visited all the points pretty well. But her conclusion did not restate all of them. She just concluded and said, "This is what you learned today." But overall, I did learn a lot, and I think she did a good job.
All right. I thought the attention device was fine. The idea that when you traveled you discovered some other way of looking at that subject was nice. It's interesting that you've got a prisoner that you are interacting with. The experience there sounds like it might be definitely different. I don't know, for example, if there are any limitations on some of the things that you described in the European experience. I would assume, for example, that people who are guilty of violent crimes generally aren't given weekend passes. I don't know. There are some details that are missing here. But the general comparison, I thought you did a pretty good job on. You spelled out what it was that you were going to talk about. There's a pretty solid preview. The visualization of the pod approach that you have at the beginning is interesting. I'm not exactly sure what the basis of that is and why it supposedly works better. Also, I'm not sure if it's universal, if it's practiced in all those European countries, or if there's a specific place that you're making reference to. And that's one of those things that's detailed in the supporting citations that probably would have clarified things. The visualizations of the cells was fine. I was wondering why we weren't getting a similar visualization to American prisons, since that's the contrast that you're talking about. And later on, you have a lot of contrasting information in table charts, for instance, about the amount of time they spend in prison or how much it costs, recidivism rates, that sort of thing. So it just seemed like that would have been a natural thing to do with that early visualization. The idea of restorative justice, I think, needs to be explained a little bit more and how it works. The example that you have of the one person, the mass killer, I assume that's that Swedish guy who killed the 77 people in the one incident, a mass killer getting 21 years. At the end of the sentence, how that person's assessed and evaluated, I would be interested in hearing something about that. That seems to me to be an issue that probably is value-based more than anything else. I thought we could see the time schedule that you're showing reasonably well. The information about the schooling system or the reform systems that they have in the American system needs to definitely be cited. You do sometimes have a tendency to talk to one side of the room or to the screen a little bit more. I think Matt was pointing that out a bit. And you remember on this assignment, I didn't tell people that they couldn't use notes for the informative speech, but I thought you used them judiciously here. It wasn't too problematic. It was almost 11 minutes though, so it was 3 minutes longer than it was supposed to be. Okay, thank you.